welcome back to Whispers from the Veil. So sometimes the veil between our time and the past can be blurred, and when these cases happen, they are what is known as time slips. Now, some of these stories can be easily debunkable, while others, they have no explanation. And I'll be talking about three time slip stories today, ranging from people going back to the 50s all the way to revolutionary France. Now come with me to Liverpool. You see, Liverpool is a city in England with an immense history. Liverpool began its transformation into a global hub in the early 18th century, with ships coming in all over the world. And also, Liverpool is a heavily industrialised city also. It has two great football teams known the world over, and they have a total of 15 European trophies and one international trophy between them, and as well as numerous league and domestic cups between them. But Liverpool holds a strange and dark record. It is a global hub for time slips, a ground zero, if you will, and the place where you may encounter these time slips is Bold Street, right in the heart of Liverpool town centre. The Bold Street time slips are infamous in the paranormal community. But why Bold Street? Is it different to any other street in the UK? Well, the simple answer is no. No, it is not. It is like any other city street in the sense it's got its own independent shops, bars, quirky cafes and restaurants with a modern feel to them. But there is something about Bold Street that people keep on saying they've experienced something from the past. The best known time slip story from Bold Street is Frank's story. It happened in 1996. Frank was an off-duty police officer, and he was out shopping in Liverpool with his wife. They split up for a while, so they could do their own thing. Frank went into the local music store, while Carol, she went to the nearest bookstore. But when Frank finished doing what he was doing, he began walking to meet his wife. But he noticed what you can only describe as a sudden stillness, a dead spot of quietness. And at that exact moment, he was almost hit by a small 1950s box van on what was in the 90s, a pedestrianised area. Looking around to see what was happening, Frank noticed things were just a bit different. The bookstore where his wife was in suddenly turned into a women's store called Cripps, and that Bold Street jumped back decades from what it was. Frank also noticed that shoppers were dressed in 1950s fashion, and the atmosphere was completely different from the 90s city that he knew so well. But what even more made it more strange is that Frank saw a woman dressed in 90s fashion, carrying a Miss Selfridge bag, walking into Cripps. So Frank followed her, and there he was, back in the bookshop, and with the bookshop's familiar shelves. And when he saw that woman, he asked her, "Did you see that?" And she replied that she thought a new clothes shop had opened where the bookshop used to be. This time slip only lasted a matter of minutes, but it's something that Frank has never stopped talking about, or ever will. Now, the other time slip story I chose from Bold Street is Jane's story. It was 2006 when a student named Jane was meeting a friend at Liverpool Central Station at 3 p.m. Jane was running a wee bit late, so to make up for the time she started to run, and as she was running up Bold Street, she phoned her friend just to let them know that she was running behind time. Then suddenly, in mid-conversation, after running halfway up the street, the call went blank. There was no signal. Jane instantly knew something was not right, and she suddenly became aware that her surroundings had changed. She was no longer in 2006 Liverpool. She was in Victorian Liverpool. Jane thought that she suddenly became upon a movie set where everyone was dressed in Victorian attire. She described seeing horses and carriages, and there was mud, muck, and straw on the streets. There was also oil lamps, and when she even talked to the shopkeepers who were unfazed by her modern clothing, the whole experience lasted for a minute, and there she was, back in the same spot in Bold Street. And when she arrived at the station to meet a friend, she arrived in a state of confusion and felt dizzy from that experience. Now we're going to leave Liverpool and travel across the English Channel to France and to one of the most famous time slip stories of them all. A story that takes us to the Palace of Versailles and two English women named Charlotte Anne Moberly and Eleanor Gendarme. Now, these women were not just random tourists. Charlotte Moberly was born in 1846 and came from a professional family. Her father had been the headmaster of Winchester College, then later became the Bishop of Salisbury. In 1886, Moberly became the first principal of what would become known as St Hugh's College in Oxford. Eleanor Jourdain was born in 1863. Her father was a vicar, and she was also highly educated for a woman of her time. She had written several textbooks, ran a school of her own, and was going to become Moberly's assistant at St Hugh's. Before Jourdain took up the position, it was decided that two women should get to know each other. Jourdain had an apartment in Paris where she tutored English children, so Moberly travelled to France to stay with her. And this brings us to the 10th of August, 1901. The two women decided to take a trip to the Palace of Versailles, and after touring the palace, decided to walk through the gardens towards the Petit Trianon, a small chateau in the grounds of Versailles that had been closely associated with Marie Antoinette. The women had a guidebook but somehow missed the main avenue and became lost. They found themselves walking down a lane where Moberly noticed a woman shaking a white cloth from a window, while Jourdain noticed an old deserted farmhouse with an old plough outside. And this is where things became strange. Both women began to feel that the atmosphere had changed. There was a strange feeling of oppression and dreariness that came over them. They encountered two men, who they believed to be both gardeners. The men were dressed in long greyish-green coats, and they were wearing tricorn hats. The men told him to continue to go straight ahead. Jourdain noticed something even stranger. She noticed a cottage where a woman appeared to be holding out a jug to a young girl standing in the doorway, but there was something odd about the whole scene. Jourdain described it as like a living picture, almost though the people in front of her were frozen into a scene from another time. But weirdly, Moberly did not see this. She certainly felt something was wrong, and she later described everything around her as looking unnatural. There was a certain stillness, a lifelessness. Even the trees seemed flat. There appeared to be no light or shade, and there was no wind moving around them. The women continued walking until they reached the edge of the wood near the Temple de la Mort, and this is when they encountered a man sitting beside a garden kiosk. He was wearing a cloak and a large hat. Both women found something deeply unpleasant about him. Jourdain described his face as being marked by smallpox, and there was something evil, unnatural, and unseen about his expression. The other man appeared suddenly. He was tall with dark eyes and curly black hair. Beneath a large hat, He directed the women towards a petit train. They crossed the bridge, and they reached the gardens in front of the building. And this is where Mobley saw the person that made this story famous. Sitting on the grass was a woman, apparently sketching. She was wearing a light summer dress and a large white hat, with fair hair underneath it. At first Mobley thought she was some other visitor. Something about the women's clothing appeared completely out of place. Years later, after researching what they experienced, Mobley had become convinced that the woman she saw sitting there was no other than Marie Antoinette. And here is the other strange part of the story. Jourdan never saw that woman. Eventually, the strange atmosphere disappeared, and the two women found themselves amongst the ordinary visitors again. They toured the Petit Train and had tea and returned to Paris. Neither woman immediately told the others what they thought had happened or saw, and it wasn't until about a week later that Mobley was writing to his sister about a visit and asked Jourdan a strange question. She asked Jourdan, "Did you think the Petit Train was haunted?" Jourdan told her that she did. Then 3 months later, the women compared their memories and wrote separate accounts of what they experienced. They began researching the history of Versailles and became convinced that somehow, on that afternoon in 1901, they had walked into the past. They had returned to the gardens several times trying to retrace the route they had taken, but they couldn't. Some of the things they remember seeing appeared to be missing, including the bridge they believed that they had crossed. Yet in 1903, an old map of the Trianon Gardens was discovered, and it showed apparently a bridge in that area. The women continued their research, and Mobley came to believe that the women they had seen was Marie Antoinette, and they attempted to identify some of the other people they had counted. 10 years after this strange experience, in 1911, Mobley and Jourdan published their account in a book called An Adventure, using the pseudonyms of Elizabeth Morrison and Francis Lamont. Their story caused a sensation. Now there's something that should be mentioned about Mobley and Jourdan. Their experience at Versailles was not the only paranormal experience that either women claimed to have had. Both have claimed to experience paranormal events before and after their strange encounter at Versailles, and I think this is important to remember when looking at their story. Now, it is fair to say these stories can be considered debunkable, or some creepypasta. I'm going to leave that one up to you guys out there. Is there something strange in Bold Street, Liverpool? Or is it just some selective memory issue? Maybe energy interference from somewhere? Or the most likely, probably just a good story. And with the Versailles time trip, is there a more probable explanation? Something that can be easily solved? I'm going to leave that one up for you guys out there too. Remember that it is up to you out there to say if these are real or not. All I am is just a narrator, giving you the information so you can choose to believe or not. And as I always say to you guys out there, yourselves have a good day, or even a good night even, and take care all, and goodbye.